coming to ABC and Hulu.
Amanda Riley was a mother, wife,
speaker at her church.
And then
she got diagnosed with cancer.
A beloved young Christian woman fighting a battle undeserved.
We thought she was God's gift, but she was a liar.
Why would somebody fake cancer?
From the #1 smash hit podcast.
It was only a matter of time until Amanda's whole world came tumbling down.
You're not going to believe this. Scamanda premieres Thursday night, January 30th on ABC and stream on Hulu.
This new year, enrich your life by learning a new language with Rosetta Stone. Their immersive courses ensure long-term language retention, and their true accent feature even gives you pronunciation feedback. Plus, Rosetta Stone's flexible learning options let you learn anywhere, anytime. Start the new year off with a resolution you can reach. Today, listeners can get 50% off Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership by visiting rosettastone.com/pod50. That's 50% off unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Visit rosettastone.com/pod50.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, a Northern Irish doctor was known for his care of elderly patients and for winding up in their wills. Was he responsible for more than 100 deaths? We'll talk about the podcast Assume Nothing, a Deadly Diagnosis from BBC Radio Ulster. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of The Final Curtain, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca.
And finally, our captain of all things cynical, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Rip Current, Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
So, Kevin?
Mm-hmm.
This is Monday's program.
It is.
What's coming up on Thursday's action-packed episode of Crime Writers On?
We're talking about the podcast Dakota Spotlight, Homicide at House of Bottles.
All right, looking forward to that conversation.
I think it's the best name for a liquor store ever, by the way.
House of Bottles.
House of Bottles. Although, when we were recently, we went to a wedding in Rockaway, New York.
Yeah.
Far Rockaway. And what we were driving through...
Howard Beach.
Howard Beach.
Yeah.
And there's a liquor store...
Yep.
Right on off the main drag, but it's on like the traffic island.
Yeah.
They're essentially, it was like a
median.
Like a median,
median.
Yeah, there was like a fork in the road and
liquor store on the corner.
And there was
a liquor store across the street. The one on the corner was called Liquor Island. And then the one right across the street was called Liquor City.
I love Liquor Island, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, or was it Beer Island?
Beer Island. Yeah. Somebody from Howard Beach, let us know.
Yeah, somebody from Howard Beach, by the way, was all decorated for Christmas. It was super cute.
Like Whoville. It was great.
It was really, really cute.
Well, on my Life 360, where my friends track me to make sure I'm not being murdered or something, my house is called the House of Hydration.
Oh.
Yes. I'm at the House of Hydration right now.
At the House of Hydration.
Our house would be the House of Owls, probably, or the House of what? Dogs barking?
It'd be probably Podcast Factory.
Last week's podcast, when I was editing it, you could 100% hear the dogs barking in the background.
Yeah.
They were going to ape shit. What are you going to do?
Stupid dogs.
What are you going to do? Can I just throw something out there for our listeners who might have interest in this?
Yeah.
This is a good time. I never generally promote stuff I work on at NHPR on this podcast, but I work on something that has become much more interesting in the last couple of weeks than it was before, although it's always been interesting to work on. The show that I directly oversee and edit is called Civics 101. And we are working on all kinds of episodes right now based on political norms, civic norms, government norms, constitutional norms, and what they look like today. Like we're doing one on a constitutional crisis. We're doing one on birthright citizenship. It's a very interesting time to work on that podcast. And if you are interested in a very, very smart podcast about how things are supposed to work or how they always have worked or how they might work in the future if big changes get made, Civics 101 is your jam. Right, Kevin?
Mm-hmm.
Kevin's always suggesting episodes for Civics 101. He's like, you guys should do Dig Safe.
Yeah.
Oh.
What is Dig Safe? Where did that come from?
I want to know what Dig Safe is too.
That'd be a great crossover with Outside In, which is the other NHPR podcast that you produce.
Yes, Outside In is also really, really gotten so good lately. It's always been good, but it's gotten like hella good lately.
But sometimes I'm like, what about those community development block grants? Can you talk about block grants for 30 minutes?
What about an exciting episode that would be?
That sounds like what I would listen to at night to go to sleep.
Yeah, Kevin's on one. Kevin's on one about the lottery.
That's my jam.
Yeah.
History of the lottery.
That's right. All right. Well, Kevin, we can only stretch for so long, right?
I guess that's true. Yeah.
Should we go ahead and talk about the podcast we're supposed to be talking about on this podcast?
Let's do it.
All right. Leading off.
He had the eponymous nervous breakdown. He eventually scraped a pass and became a doctor. He was suboptimal. He wasn't really good enough. He wanted to have the same regard socially as some of these great and good who he was treating.
In the 1940s and 50s, Dr. John Bodkin Adams grew a large practice in East Sussex caring for the elderly. But few knew that Adams was administering heroin to his wealthy patients before they slipped into comas. Many listed the doctor as executor of their estates or left him a sizable inheritance in their wills.
The deaths of some of his rich patients, I do not think they were all natural. Subjecting patients to hypnotic drugs and inducing them to those pills.
Officials later determined the deaths of over 160 of Adams' patients were suspicious. His 1957 prosecution for murder was dubbed the trial of the century. But was Adams killing his elderly patients for money, or was he simply easing the pain of their dying days?
The question, who was Dr. John Bodkin Adams?
Out everyone, out at once.
An innocent man? A murderer?
A doctor must be allowed some alone time with his patient.
Someone euthanizing his patients.
Broadcast on BBC Radio Ulster and distributed by BBC Sounds, Assume Nothing, A Deadly Diagnosis is the latest installment in the investigative podcast series. Host Vinny Hurrell revisits the historical true crime case of a Northern Irish GP suspected of being a serial killer. Was Adams an angel of mercy or an angel of death? Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about plot points from Assume Nothing, Deadly Diagnosis. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. So, Laura, you have an interesting note right at the top about the format of this podcast. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So when I started listening to this podcast, I'm like, oh, look, short episodes. And, you know, I love everything British. So I was like, oh, sweet. So I was listening along, first episode, and I'm like, did I miss something? Like, what's happening here? Because I didn't feel like I got an introduction that actually sort of set up what I was going to be hearing. And I was like, did I listen to the wrong episode?
That also could have happened, by the way, because the episodes are all posted in the wrong order.
Yeah, I felt like I was on like this sort of stream of consciousness sort of walk around with the host who was like talking to people. And it took me until maybe the second or third episode to actually figure out what was happening, because they were talking about things in a way like we were already supposed to know what was going on.
In 1952, patient Julia Bradnam, unlike many of Adams's other patients, seemed in fairly good health. She lived here in this quaint cottage-like terrace house in Eastbourne. Adams had been opening this very gate and trekking up the pathway for some time, writing prescriptions for medication.
I did not know what was going on, except they were talking to little old English ladies about things in little English villages. And I was like, okay. So I feel like a little setup, what I call the nut graph back in my journalism days, would have been really helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you, Laura. And I just want to follow up on the thing that I said just then. The episodes of this podcast are posted in the wrong order. It's like 1, 2, 6, 5, 3. And if anyone,
something happened, yeah.
If anybody who is working on the podcast is listening to this, just know you can go into your audio host and change the dates on all of your episodes and like post the furthest one back and then just make them 5 minutes apart or something going forward, and then they'll repost in the right order.
You think maybe like they did a quick edit of some kind and then
the metadata is just bad on the podcast. So anyway, it's frustrating to try to listen to something in order and then have it not be in order. But that's not the producer's fault. That's a technical issue.
The episodes are numbered, by the way.
They are numbered.
If you get too confused, as long as you know your numbers in order, it's helpful.
I recently learned this, and I can tell you why I learned it in a couple of weeks, but I can't tell you yet, that Apple Podcasts and other podcast hosts don't want you putting numbers in your episode titles anymore. Because if you do them correctly, it will index by itself. And so they just want you to upload them with the correct metadata, not with numbers in the titles. But in this case, it really did help. So did you feel like you had a sense, Toby, of context, place, time, what we're listening to?
Yeah. So I don't know if this, like, if you're in Northern Ireland or Britain or whatever, that this, like, you have context for this. Like, it's just kind of common knowledge. I put a note in that it felt like I'd shown up for a lecture, but I hadn't done the reading. So it's just like some of it made sense. Like, I had to go back and I was like, wait, when is this taking place again? And then at times they have like these little markers, which I don't think mean very much to American listeners, like the Suez Crisis. Like, I don't know how many people really know what the Suez Crisis is. Like, I remembered it from college, but I was a history major, which really narrows down the demographic.
I guess I'm the only one because my dad's Marine unit was dispatched to the Suez Crisis.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm the only one.
Interesting.
But, yeah.
America had very mixed feelings about the Suez Crisis, apparently.
Yeah.
Wasn't it also a plot point in the Crown?
It's in the Crown. It's in the Hour, which is another good BBC show.
Everything I know about Britain, I learned from the Crown. No, not really, but a lot of it.
But anyway, so a lot of this takes place in Eastbourne, which seems like kind of an unusual place in that there's a lot of old rich people who live there. But you don't really get a sense of why or what the town is like or any of this stuff. It's just sort of a name and a couple of facts. I think it's kind of in a microcosm. A lot of what kind of goes wrong in this is that I just didn't feel like I had enough information to really envision or give a shit about what was going on.
Toby, what you said about not doing the reading really resonated with me. At a couple of points listening to this, I was like, am I having a dream? Like, is this one of those dreams where you're just like completely unprepared for whatever it is? Like, you show up for a math test and you realize you haven't gone to class all year. I had that exact same thought. Kevin, what are your thoughts about the context here?
Well, this is an historical true crime podcast, which is a specific subgenre here of true crime. And by the way, it's actually formatted for radio because it's one of these ones where, what's the term, Rebecca, where
if it's in a segment, it's broadcast ready?
Broadcast ready. Okay, yeah, sure. So the radio segments are on BBC Ulster, and then BBC Sounds, which is their podcast arm, distributes it worldwide.
And monetizes it through ads outside of the UK.
Yes, just a warning to the British people who are going to get all pissed off. They're like, where's this money coming from? Yes, and I was always surprised that this podcast put together in Northern Ireland, all of a sudden, it's got an ad for my local auto dealership. It's like, oh man, geofencing is incredible. Anyway, so we have to remember, because it falls in this specific subgenre here, there's always challenges for news gathering and storytelling because of the resources, right? And I know Toby knows this because a lot of his podcasts have to do with like historical events. It's not like you're doing the Scott Peterson case where everybody's still around, right? So I'm actually pretty surprised at like how much they were able to accomplish given those challenges. Like finding patients of a doctor accused of murder 60 plus years ago, I mean, I think is a pretty good get. They leaned on a lot of authors and researchers, and they're able to get more than, just what you would normally get from historical true crime, which is either you do something about a big famous case that everybody knows, like Lizzie Borden, or you do something that's very obscure. And at least in this case, that Vinny, the host, was like, I heard about this case from pub night trivia, and I'm like, okay, that's something. So for what it is, I understand sort of what the format is and kind of admire the fact that they were able to get as much as they could to put this together.
You know what's so interesting? The intro, Kevin, that transparently you wrote for me because you are the EP of the show and you write the intros. It says officials later determined the deaths of over 160 of Adams' patients.
Mm-hmm.
The podcast didn't start that way. It didn't start with like
no.
You're never going to believe the story about this dude who killed potentially hundreds of people, right, Laura?
I think they finally said that. That's why I was like, am I listening to this? They finally said that in like the end of the third episode, I think. And I was like, why wasn't this right at the beginning? Because then I would have known what I was listening to and why it was so significant. But I'm like, why was that missing? What happened?
Yeah. At least we didn't get the Scary Terry treatment where they told us he was the Charles Manson of Northern Ireland, although he sounds like he may have been worse. Who knows? So, Toby, what do you think about the timing of the release of this podcast and the fact that this, he learned this fact in pub trivia that it became a podcast at all?
I don't know what to think. I don't know if there's something going on in Northern Ireland or the British Isles that this case provides some insight into or something, or whether it was literally like, oh, that sounds cool, let's make a podcast about it, and they whipped it out, and whipped it out is probably not the right word. They put it together and released it.
He might have whipped it out. That could be why these ladies were giving him everything in their will.
One never knows what's going to happen.
Excuse us while we whip this out.
But yeah, Laura is always like, why now? Why this? Why now? And sometimes I'm like, well, it's just kind of a cool story. But in this case, it really is like, to me, I was just like, why am I listening to this?
Because Kevin told us to.
Oh.
That's why.
Yeah. But like Kevin was saying, like I've put out 50 some episodes of like historical podcasting, and I guess I have my own sort of preferences for what kind of goes into them or whatever. But it's not really told that much differently than if it happened yesterday. Like, you're not given any kind of orientation to what was going on at the time or how these things might have hit different at the time. Like, I don't even remember, and maybe I missed this, but in the gay love triangle podcast, I don't think they even talked about like sort of the legal trouble that you could get into for being gay at that time and stuff like that. Like, there was more going on there than just like a possible conspiracy. So it just kind of felt like there was no anchor to any time. Like, I feel like what was actually interesting about it was brought up towards the end, like maybe the second to last episode, when they start talking about the difference between like killing people and taking care of people end of life. I wish somebody had just like sat down and been like, what are we trying to accomplish with this? Like, what's interesting about this? What do we want people to take away from this? What might people know or not know coming into this? And sort of use that as a guide to what you're actually going to end up doing. Because what happens here, I hate to say it, but it kind of feels like a really long Wikipedia article where like you wish you had some hyperlinks to like go places to check out like other aspects of it, but they're just not provided in the actual show.
It's funny you mentioned the wiki page, because I started listening to this in the car with my daughter Lily, and we're like 5 minutes in, and I like look over and she's already got the Wikipedia page up. Because I was like, wait a minute, did we get a time period, like a decade? And she, oh yeah, they mentioned, okay, they went by really fast. And I look over, and so I saw the photo of the guy, but I'm like, oh, I can't spoil myself on that. One of the things Toby was talking about was when we get to the episode about the gay love triangle. That was interesting, but the other stakes that they bring up were the political ones about this at the time, the murder case against a physician, where I think we could have had a little more about that fact, because like it was a politically fraught moment as they're trying to develop the NHS. And okay, well, all of a sudden, if you have a doctor, like, are we going to be able to start accusing doctors of all these crimes for what they're doing? And also, we don't remember it, but ask your parents or grandparents about like how revered the doctor was. And if the doctor said, blow your nose, you would immediately do it. Like, that was sort of the culture. And to me, that was an interesting tie-in that was sort of parallel to the crime. I mean, it was very suspicious that people were dying and leaving this doctor in their wills. You don't have to leave us in your will if you want to financially support us. I mean, we probably have to wait a long time for you to pass away, but
Jesus, Kevin.
It's a long investment.
Just join our Patreon is what he's trying to say. Join our Patreon, because we're in the business section, and this is when Kevin awkwardly transitions and tries to convince you, fair listener, that you should join our Patreon. Why should folks do that, Kevin?
Well, you get all sorts of exclusive content. We have over 700 exclusive episodes.
Holy cow.
At patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. Every month you get between 15 and 20 different episodes of exclusive podcasts that start at just $5 a month at our leading off level. You get all sorts of great podcasts like Married with Podcast, our exclusive advice podcast where we give advice to people about relationships and
anyone
parenting.
About anything.
And the latest episode, we've got a great question about somebody who's been friend-zoned.
Yes.
And should she go for it?
No. End of episode.
And I said yes.
And Kevin said, well, Kevin and I vehemently disagreed. Kevin, I did ask you after we finished taping, you've done this in your life. What percentage of times has it worked out for you?
I'm 0 for 2 on going after the
unrequited loves
of being in the friend zone and breaking out. Other exclusive podcasts include Rebecca's Karen Reed case updates and the Readathon, and we have the Crime Writers on After Show, where we hang out and we talk about more stuff in the champagne room. This week, we're going to be talking about Laura Bricker's wine club that she was posting on social media. We want to get a little, and I also have a wine related anecdote to share.
We're gonna have some color in our show.
If you want to know more about Laura Bricker, join us at the Brichter scale level, where you get her exclusive podcast.
You get to visit inside her brain regularly.
Get inside her brain.
It's like Herman's head, except it's the Brichter scale. Remember Herman's head?
I do.
It was a sitcom about 4 people living inside this guy named Herman's head, and it was sort of like the what's that Pixar thing? It's like way before that Pixar thing about
Inside Out, or
the
what's
feelings one. This is like the sitcom that was about that, but many, many years ago.
If you join us at the Let's Do What We Do Love, you get episodes of Crime Writers on early and ad-free. You would already know what our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews are of this podcast. But why give it away?
Why?
Why would you? And you can also become a deep diver. At that level, not only will you get to hear Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast, like the rest of us, but you'll also get to watch the recording, partake, put your notes in the chat. Even Toby might even bring you in on the screen if you want. Toby's been prepping for the 2025 season of the Deep Dive. Toby, what's the next book?
The next book is Murder in the Bayou by Ethan Brown.
I feel like that John Fogerty could write the theme song for this.
Yeah, you're born in the bayou and then you get murdered there.
Killed in the bayou. No, that doesn't work. All right, so we got all sorts of great ways that you can support us. And just a little note for folks, if you are a new subscriber to Patreon, if you've been with us for a long time, this doesn't affect you. But if you are a new subscriber to Patreon, we would suggest that you sign up on your laptop or your Android phone, because if you use your Apple iPhone and download the app there and sign up there, Apple will add a significant surcharge to your subscription if you purchase it. It doesn't take away money from us. It just adds the cost to you.
So if you're purchasing it through the app, it treats it like a paid app feature.
Yes.
But if you go to if you can even go to Safari and go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia and join there and just put in your credit card or whatever details like you want to. Yeah.
You can listen to our content on any platform you want, but that's just the thing. They do that for everybody. Everybody hates it. All the developers hate it. And now it's affecting us podcasters. But that's just some advice to you. You do what you want. You can either leave the money to your elderly doctor, or you can help us out here by joining us patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
Kevin, does thus end our business section?
That ends the business section.
All right, I'm going to fade that music out right now. Kevin, who's our next sponsor for this podcast?
Oh, we're brought to you by HelloFresh.
HelloFresh.
Tired of figuring out what's for dinner night after night?
Yes.
Especially on those busy weekdays?
Yes.
Get dinner done an easier way, thanks to HelloFresh.
HelloFresh.
Now, look, I think that, you can, sell a product on a lot of different points. We could talk about the quality of the food, the price point. Let me just talk about convenience for a second.
Do it.
Okay? There's a lot of us that when we do takeout, we're going to get pizza or get something from the Chinese restaurant. We're doing that not because we've been looking forward all day to that restaurant.
Right.
We've been doing it because
we're tired.
5 or 6 o'clock comes around, you haven't thought about it, and so you're looking for something convenient.
Correct.
You're willing to spend a couple of bucks for that convenience, so somebody
More
can
than
bring.
A couple.
Oh yeah, I mean, when we get Chinese food,
it's like $100. Wow.
So I'm offering you something that is both convenient and at a great price point. It's HelloFresh. It's easy to find time to eat well. They have 50 wholesome, hassle-free meals, so you got a lot to choose from. And HelloFresh's new ready-made meals, they go from the fridge to your fork in just 3 minutes.
Amazing. So get up to 10 free meals and a free high-protein item for life at HelloFresh.com/CWO10FM.
CWO10FM.
1 item per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's up to 10 HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/CWO10FM.
CWO10FM.
FM for free meals.
Coming to ABC and Hulu.
Amanda Riley was a mother, wife,
speaker at her church,
and then she got diagnosed with cancer.
A beloved young Christian woman fighting a battle undeserved.
We thought she was God's gift, but she was a liar.
Why would somebody fake cancer?
From the #1 smash hit podcast.
It was only a matter of time until Amanda's whole world came tumbling down.
You're not going to believe this. Scamanda premieres Thursday night, January 30th on ABC and stream on Hulu.
So, Kevin, this show left you cold?
Yeah, but the winter clothes at Quince will never leave you cold.
Nice.
Did you not get what you wanted for Christmas?
I got
No,
a
I'm
lot
not
of
asking
it.
you.
Oh.
I'm not asking you. I'm talking to the listener.
Oh, okay.
Did you not get what you wanted for Christmas?
They didn't.
Nor did you not get what you wanted for your December birthday, where everybody just gives you a gift and says this is for both? What a ripoff, right?
Lame.
Super lame. All right, well,
here's one shoe for your birthday, another shoe for Christmas.
I like how that works. Yeah. One glove. Yeah. Treat yourself to a little something without spending a fortune with Quince. So all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands because they partner directly with top factories and cut out the middleman, passing the savings on to you. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. Rebecca, I know that you are the unofficial ambassador of Quince to the world.
And I did some Christmas shopping there. Want to hear what I got?
Yeah, tell us.
You saw. Mm-hmm. I gave your daughter an incredible faux fur jacket. I have the same one, white, super fuzzy one. It's amazing. And I gave one of our kids a cashmere fisherman's sweater from Quince. It's so beautiful.
That will definitely keep them warm. So treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/crime for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/crime to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crime.
Laura.
Yes.
Every time either one of these gentlemen here has uttered the words gay love triangle, your eyebrows have shot right up. You have a note about it.
Basically, it was like the doctor was having a relationship with a police person and a judge at the same time. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's hard to know.
I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I felt like we threw that in because they were like trying to be like all scandalous that this was happening at that time in history when this was not something that was talked about or acceptable. But what I was interested in about this was like, okay, like what level of potential contamination in eventually prosecuting this guy or even bringing this guy up on charges did that play? If you have people involved in the police and also the court system,
None.
Apparently, I was like, that was my thing. I was like, oh my God, this is like literally the old boys network right here at play in this case. But again, there was so many things in this podcast that were just sort of thrown in there and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's something now. And I want to just go back to something that Toby was saying, like, why now? Because we know that's what I always say. I went to the Wikipedia as well, Kevin, to see why now. And the actual investigative files were opened up back in the early 2000s. So it wasn't even like there was new information. It was like all those police reports and all this information has been out there for like over 20 years.
Yeah. And someone's like, I'm going to make it into a series. I started learning about it at pub trivia. So Toby, you actually brought this up before the break that, this argument that you thought was compelling around end of life, sort of like mercy care. Do you want to flesh that out a little bit? Because what you have in your notes here was that, actually providing end-of-life care in a humane way, is it wrong to shorten someone's life by a few hours or a few days if that means great comfort for them while alive? What were you thinking when you wrote that note?
What the hell was I thinking?
Yes.
So, I think the most interesting thing that comes out of this, in my mind, is this debate about if you end somebody's life like a day earlier than it would have naturally, but they're in incredible pain and you give them heroin to kind of ease the pain and they die, like, is that like murder? Or if you're a doctor and you're saying, well, this person was in excruciating pain, their lifespan from the moment that I gave them the shot was probably 24 hours. So is it preferable for them to suffer for an extra 24 hours of life as opposed to, essentially being euthanized? But it's not as though that's, I guess the question really comes down to, is euthanizing somebody 24 hours before they're going to die anyway and were in great pain, is that really a crime? And I guess it probably was at the time. But I think ethically as a doctor, I don't know what first do no harm means in that situation. Are you harming somebody if you have the capability to lessen their pain, even if it might mean that they die? I don't know. Is forcing somebody to continue to live in extreme pain, ethically, where are you with that? I think that's an interesting question. I think it's especially interesting Like if they'd given us some idea of like what people were thinking in 1950 or whatever.
I thought it was interesting to think about what people think now. And so I think the idea of it being a crime is interesting, but there's no context there. You're right. They never said, this is a debate and this is how people feel about it. And maybe today, if it were done a different way, it wouldn't be illegal, or it would. Like, those are things that we don't get at all.
Well, I know that in America, there's a legal doctrine about, and somewhat theoretical, but it's that if a guy is falling from a skyscraper and you shoot a gun through a window and kill him on the way down, have you committed murder, or are you responsible for his death? And the legal doctrine, I believe, and the lawyers out there can scream at me if I'm wrong, is you're still responsible for killing him. So the idea that it was going to happen anyway, again, I don't know if it's applicable here, and I certainly don't know if it's applicable in Sussex in 1957, but it's a great question, Toby, about like, is that wrong? But I don't know. Maybe it is if that's what you were doing, as opposed to, positioning yourself to get into somebody's will and then moving them along so you could get 1,000 pounds and buy a fucking Rolls Royce.
Well, somebody does. I mean, that's another thing that kind of comes up towards the end is somebody says, well, if it hadn't been for the money, this wouldn't have been an issue.
Oh, yeah, because like killing people is cool.
Well, I mean, I think it's, if it was just like doing end of life care, but he wasn't benefiting from it in some way.
Or would he just not have been caught if he hadn't?
Right. But in some ways, it seems like a separate question, which is, regardless of what you're doing with your patients, like I could see one or two patients being like super thankful to you and not having other relatives and be like, hey, I'm going to give you some money because you made my life so much better. But this idea that like dozens and dozens are doing it, even if you aren't then murdering them with heroin, or not murdering, but providing them pain relief with a lethal dose of heroin, that whole bit was weird. And that seems more like a coercion thing than a murder thing. And maybe it's coercion with the aid of drugs, like you give somebody a bunch of morphine and ask them to sign their will.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Kevin, can you believe we're having this deep a conversation with a podcast that had as many sound effects as this podcast had?
You mean all of the actor recreations? And I mean, I will give credit that they acknowledge right up front what they're doing as far as the format and sort of giving the disclaimers. And so it's like, you decide whether or not that's disqualifying for you, that we only have transcripts or whatever.
This series uses real statements, testimony, and police files. We have dramatized certain elements of the story using those files, and scripting has been done based on them and information from interviewees. All of this to enable us to tell the story.
So it's kind of up to you to decide like whether or not like that's disqualifying or not. But, I would just say like from the actors, some are better than others.
I don't think she's breathing. Is there a pulse?
She's no longer with us.
Bobby died. Dr. Adams labelled the death as a
cerebral hemorrhage, or bleed in the brain, if you will.
Those.
I do like the ones, there's like a couple of like nice Cockney ones. Are pretty Cockney in there, along with the very posh sounding people.
It's like a radio play. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, a little bit of like a radio play. I do though, as far as like all the actual people that we do hear interviews from, I do like the one woman who definitely thought like the Irish were dishonest.
Yes, that was hilarious.
Are you from Ireland?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Oh.
I'm not easily offended. You say what you need to say, and that's all right.
Well, I mean, they don't tell the truth, let's put it that way. He was a nasty piece of work.
An interesting description of Dr. Adams, not to mention a general view of the Irish.
Well, she has a point, right, Kevin?
Hey,
Flynn?
now. Just because I stole all her money.
So, Laura, speaking of gossip, it is interesting how, everyone is talking about this guy in like a pre-social media era, right?
Yeah, I thought that was when I did find out when this took place, when I was like actually like just looking it up online instead of listening to the podcast. I'm like, okay, so like in the 30s and 40s, before this guy actually is called to be accountable for what's happening, people are all whispering about this. Like, I'm thinking of that book I got for Christmas, How Not to Get Murdered in a Little English Village, because everybody sort of had this ability to tell each other about what was happening. They're not sharing it on Facebook. They're not sharing it over the radio. They're not sharing it in the newspaper or whatever. But despite the fact that it sounds like it was kind of openly known that people were speculating about this, that it went on so long before anything happened was kind of wild to me. But I did like envisioning that, like, you know, little English village. And did you hear about that doctor? Well, got another one this week. Well, Mrs. So-and-so over there. Like, I just had this sort of like, okay, that's kind of interesting.
And he was sort of charged like through that kind of, he ended up being charged because of people talking, right?
Right. Because eventually it was like the friend of one of the victims who was like, yeah, sent like the anonymous letter that was like, yeah, you need to look at this. Something isn't right here. But I think that was the case that he wasn't actually convicted on.
Yeah. So, Laura, regarding not getting murdered in an English village, I've watched enough British procedurals to know, isn't the key just to not know something that could ruin someone else's life? Or if you do know it, never tip off that you know that thing? It's always that, right?
Yeah, it's always somebody who knows. Yeah, somebody knows something, Kevin.
About somebody.
Yes.
And that person kills them, or that person kills them to protect somebody else. Like, that's how not
and
to
it's
get killed.
A long ago secret.
Yes, a long ago secret from when they were maybe a different person or something.
I bet none of his poor patients died.
Really?
Yeah, I bet they're all still around.
Or did his poor patients die? We just don't know about them because nobody spoke up on their behalf because there was no will.
Yeah, I mean, that's likely. But when you have like so many patients that die going into comas, or there was the cerebral thrombosis, I mean, I think that's probably what they went through. Because like 106, I mean, I know it's like over 10 years, but like you're averaging like more than one a month that dies under suspicious circumstances. So, you know, and super scandalous at the time, obviously. But yeah, I mean, who's to say?
Coming to ABC and Hulu.
Amanda Riley was a mother, wife,
speaker at her church.
And then
she got diagnosed with cancer.
A beloved young Christian woman fighting a battle undeserved.
We thought she was God's gift, but she was a liar.
Why would somebody fake cancer?
From the #1 smash hit podcast.
It was only a matter of time until Amanda's whole world came tumbling down.
You're not going to believe this. Scamanda premieres Thursday night, January 30th on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Put educational improvement on your New Year's resolution list. IXL makes learning fun through engaging video lessons and interactive problems that adapt to your child's learning pace. Plus, with the app, kids can learn on the go, and one subscription covers all your children's educational needs. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And our listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/20. Visit IXL.com/20 to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price.
This new year, enrich your life by learning a new language with Rosetta Stone. Their immersive courses ensure long-term language retention, and their true accent feature even gives you pronunciation feedback. Plus, Rosetta Stone's flexible learning options let you learn anywhere, anytime. Start the new year off with a resolution you can reach. Today, listeners can get 50% off Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership by visiting rosettastone.com/pod50. That's 50% off unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Visit rosettastone.com/pod50.
This cold and flu season, Instacart is here to help deliver all of your sick day essentials. Whether you're in prevention mode and need vitamins, hand sanitizer, and that lemon tea your Nana swears by, or you're in healing mode and need medicine, soup, and a lot more tissues. Simply download the Instacart app to get sick day supplies that reinvigorate or relieve delivered in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Excludes restaurant orders. Service fees and terms apply.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out the podcast, Assume Nothing, A Deadly Diagnosis. Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down from this podcast by BBC Radio Ulster?
So it's so interesting going first every week because our last few weeks have been a little rough. Because here I am once again going thumbs down.
Yeah.
Assume nothing. Assume you're not going to know anything about what this podcast is about until like the 3rd or 4th episode, because there's no setup to actually tell you what's happening and what story you're being put in the middle of. I'm really bummed out because I love listening to British stories. I watch a lot of British mysteries. I love the BBC. So I was like, I think I'm pretty excited about this being on our homework list. And I was listening as I was driving. And at first I thought maybe I was on the wrong episode, but I wasn't, because I just felt like the context that I was needing to actually have a sense of the who, why I'm listening to this story wasn't there. And it was just kind of disjointed. Thankfully, the episodes were short. So that's a thumbs up portion of the review for me. But overall, I just feel like this is a historical case. If you know about it, you probably already know about it. And there wasn't necessarily any new information that was coming out. So I just felt like, why now? Why are we hearing about this now? And if we are hearing about this now, why is this not being told in a way that's a little bit more conducive to somebody who knows nothing about this case actually coming away understanding what's going on here? So thumbs down.
Tell me about, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Assume Nothing, Deadly Diagnosis?
So I think something that every podcast has to kind of deal with is like how much knowledge are people coming into about just stuff, right? Like you don't feel like you have to explain how fingerprinting works or whatever. This is kind of on the other end of that, which is I think they assume that you know a whole bunch of things that like at least I didn't know. So I just kind of felt like I was a little lost the entire time because I didn't get enough information to kind of wrap my head around what was actually going on. The thing that was a little frustrating to me is that there were a few kind of interesting questions that kind of came up at this, and they bring up those questions, but they don't really examine them in any way that would make it like interesting other than they sort of bring it up and you can think about it on your own. And you know, maybe that would have been a better way of kind of framing the whole case so that you knew kind of why you were listening to it and why you should care at this late date what had happened. It's an old thing, so they have to figure out how do you want to get across information that's written. And so there's a lot of like acted bits and stuff, and results will vary, I guess, but it wasn't to my taste. Anyway, I'm a thumbs down on this. It probably, if it was rethought, might have been interesting, but I just felt like I was more lost than I usually am during most of it.
Kevin, Assume Nothing, a Deadly Diagnosis. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
I'm going to go thumbs sideways. It's an historical true crime podcast, so you're kind of limited or somewhat boxed in by the challenges of telling that kind of story. It's better than I thought it would be. I don't think it's enough for me to like tell everybody that they need to go out and listen to it because the case in itself is not bad. You know how I feel about like sound effects and recreations when they're unnecessary or don't really advance anything. But I think some of the issues that came up towards the end were really compelling and kind of saved this from being a thumbs down for me. And I kind of wish that they had moved some of that stuff over. Remember, they call this the trial of the century. We don't really get to that until chronologically. Towards the end, like it might have been good to sort of like change up the structure of how the story was told, just to kind of like make it a little less chronologically streamlined and make it a little more engaging as a narrative. But I will give credit to the host for like trying to do things when you're talking about a 60-year-old case, like walking around the house where the guy was or in the field, just trying to do a little something. Sometimes it's a hit, sometimes it's a miss, but I'd say like give it some credit for being as good as it can be for this kind of podcast, but it's still not enough for me to say, hey, go out and listen to it.
Yeah, this is a no for me. Thumbs down. This is an episode of Crimes of the Centuries. This is not a 6-part podcast, right? This is a story that could have been told efficiently in 35 minutes, 40 minutes of just like, this is what happened, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and you're never going to believe it. This happened next. And by the way, at the beginning, we told you it was 160 people. Let's tell you how we came up with that number. Like, it's just a lot of signposting that didn't happen, a lot of too much stretching. Tevin, stuff you were complimenting the host for, I'm like, it feels like stretching to me. And I just found myself getting lost. And even though I definitely did listen in the right order to the episodes because they had the numbers in the title, I felt like I was listening to them in the wrong order. I felt very disoriented. There was no setup. There was no expectation about what you're going to hear, which can be fine if things go in truly interesting directions. Like I think of a show like Ghost Story, which starts in one thing. And if they told you everything you're going to hear in that podcast, it would have ruined it. Like it takes all these like twists and turns, right? This isn't like that. This is kind of a linear story told in a linear way with tons of names, tons of places, tons of detail. And I just found myself getting lost over and over and over again. So thumbs down for me for Assume Nothing, a Deadly Diagnosis. Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the Crime of the Week. Do you wish you could take a bowl of chicken noodle soup with you and keep it in your pocket? Maybe share it with a friend or pass it around to coworkers. Well, now you can. Progresso has unveiled Soup Drops, a hard candy infused with the flavor of poultry broth. The company calls it soup you can suck on. Soup drops are shaped like regular cough drops and come in a Progresso soup can. They're individually wrapped, so you can just put them in your pockets or the bottom of your handbag, just like your grandma did with those Werther's Originals. You don't need a spoon, but you do have to fork over $2.49 plus shipping. Progresso says their supply of soup drops got sucked up in one day, but hope to have more next week. So panel, chicken noodle flavored hard candy is neither the treat we want nor the treat we deserve. Laura Bricker, what is the next unlikely food mashup?
Oh, God. I mean, none of this sounds good to me. So I'm going to go with something that I mean, none of this.
Soup-flavored candy doesn't sound good to you.
So, I mean, if you're going to just continue in that vein, I've become obsessed. We have this new place in Exeter now where they have like traditional English meat pies.
Love them.
I would like meat pies, but not in a hard candy. Maybe in like a Cadbury Easter egg sort of format.
Or maybe like a fruit roll up, just like mashed real flat.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that.
Tell you about, what do you think is the next unlikely food mashup?
Sort of along those lines, I was thinking like a cheeseburger milkshake.
Oh, yeah. What about you, Kevin?
I think orange juice flavored toothpaste.
Isn't this just, by the way, the Violet Beauregard storyline from Willy Wonka, right? She had the gum, which tasted like a whole meal. Didn't they just make that in real life?
Just the one course?
Yeah.
The wallpaper, the snozberries have to taste like snozberries.
It sounds like they're going in that direction. I'm just
saying. Are you
saying.
under the impression that Willy Wonka is real life? Is that what I'm getting out of this?
Yes. Grandpa Joe sucks.
Everybody knows Grandpa Joe
Grandpa
sucks.
Joe is literally the worst. All right.
Fuck you, Grandpa Joe.
Laura Bricker, if folks want to reach out to you and say hi, I'd also love to try that meatball fruit roll-up. How can they find you online?
You can find me at Laura Bricker on Blue Sky and Instagram.
What about you, Toby? Where can you be found?
You know, I'm still on Twitter and I have no idea why, because I went on my freaking timeline for the first time and I don't know how long. And I was like, who are these people? Why are they in my timeline? It was like this bizarre like mix of lunatics and fringe right-wing people and stuff. So that's not the best place to reach me, although I guess I'm still there. So I'm at Toby Ball NH on Blue Sky.
What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, even though that I keep getting requests to friend at VP and at Flotus for some fucking reason, you can find me at Kevin P. Flynn. Everywhere.
You can find... No, you're not Kevin P. Flynn on Blue Sky.
Guess what? I changed my handle.
Oh, shit.
So I went from Kevin Flynn to Kevin P. Flynn just
Good
because it'd be easier.
You can find me on Blue Sky.
By the way, if I could change all the other ones, I would.
Yeah, if you can find me on Blue Sky, by the way, at Reb Lavoie. I am only on Twitter for Karen Reed-oriented gossip because the crazy community that surrounds that case is always posting the updates really, really fast. And so you can find me on Twitter, but if you want to really interact with me, go to Blue Sky or Instagram. If you want to follow the show everywhere, you can find us at Crime Writers On. We're on all the apps there. Get episodes early and ad-free at patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. You also get the Crime Writers On After Show, Married with Podcast, Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast, and Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcasts. Our theme song was composed and performed by Tyler Gibbons. Our editor is the really wonderful Livy Burdett. The EP of this show is Kevin Flynn. This show was recorded in Studio C, The Closet, in our New Hampshire basement, where we also talk shit about the Irish. Right, Kevin?
No, shove it up your butt.
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
This may hit differently in sorry. It's my buddy Scam Likely. He's just calling me all the time these days.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Just give his credit.
Sorry, so I'll start all over again.
By the way, I just realized the name of the podcast, Scam Likely, is based on that stupid incoming call thing. All right, anyway.
You just figured that out now.
I didn't fucking figure it out. I just made the connection. All right, so Toby, want to start again?
I got a shocker about S-Town then.
Yeah.
In Crime Media.